You're listening to the award-winning podcast from Rutgers Law School, The Power of Attorney. I'm your host and Dean of the Law School, Joanna Bond. I'm joined today by Kathleen Dockry, class of '82 in Newark. As managing director of the Significa Group, Kathleen oversees the design and delivery of blended online learning and group coaching programs for fast-rising leaders. She has coached some of the most accomplished leaders in business and professional firms. And as she knows from experience, Kathleen herself was the former CEO of a global company. We're going to talk about her journey through Rutgers Law and get some quick tips on effective leadership. Thank you so much, Kathy, for joining us.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Thank you for having me on. This is fun to talk about.
It's such a pleasure to have you here and to claim you as one of our alumni. It's really, really a point of pride for us. So you, I know, come from a large family. Can you tell us a little bit about your origin story?
Oh, absolutely. Although I'm going to try to keep it to the headlines, because if I go through all the nooks and crannies, it's going to get kind of long.
Right. Sure.
I grew up in New Jersey, but I grew up in a very, very small town in rural New Jersey. Oldest of 6 kids. My father was the local school principal, so I had to go to school where my father was also the principal. Not a fun thing. I would not.
No, that's a challenge.
Right. Yeah, and my mom actually was a writer, a published writer, and pretty well known at the time she was writing. So it was an interesting kind of family background. But 6 kids, not a lot of money, tiny town. It was not the sort of place where you really were exposed to a lot of life and what the possibilities could be. And it was hard to make decisions about where you were going and why you were going there, because there weren't a lot of role models for you. Yeah.
Sure. And I have to ask, did your mom write fiction or nonfiction or both?
Yeah, she wrote fiction. Yeah.
Okay.
She actually, she wrote short stories primarily. She wrote a little bit of everything.
Okay.
But she was known for her short stories, and she actually, was published in, national outlets, but also asked to do a collection of her work at a time where you couldn't self-publish. And in other words, one of the big publishing firms in New York wanted to collect her work. So I always value that part of my upbringing, because it was an Irish family. There was a lot of love for words and language,
right,
and the power that words and language have. And if I look back at my life and all the different careers, that's a theme that keeps on popping up all the time.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. So that is a perfect segue in some ways to my next question for you, which is, why did you choose Rutgers Law School as part of your career journey?
So I went off to college. I went as far away as I could. I went to North Carolina, and I just sort of threw myself out in the world, because I kind of knew I didn't really have much experience or background. And so I did what I loved, and I majored in English, and I had a minor in psychology, which I also love. And then graduation started creeping closer, and I was thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do with this.
Right.
Yeah. And about the only thing I was fit for was maybe being an English teacher at that point, and I just did not want to do it. So my boyfriend at the time had come from New Jersey as well, and he came from a family of lawyers, and he had always intended to become a lawyer. So he took the LSATs, and just on a lark, I took the LSATs.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it was, and I don't recommend it as a really planful career decision.
Right. No, obviously it worked out well for you, but
it did, because I scored off the charts. And so it was almost like going to a psychic. I was thinking, this test says I should be a lawyer. What the heck is a lawyer?
Right. But it was meant to be.
Clearly. It was meant to be. So after college, I went back. I went to work in the New York area, and and needed to both make money, but also figure out what is this law thing. So I spent 3 years working for one of the large New York law firms to
Oh,
see whether it was something I would enjoy or be any good at. And that was a great experience, by the
I
way.
bet.
Yeah.
I bet it was. That's very insightful of you to think about, this might be a good idea to go work at a law firm for a few years, see if I like this and see if it's something I want to pursue.
Exactly. It was, yeah. I'm so glad that I did it because we do know people who really jump into careers, law being one of them, thinking, that they're going to like it and then finding out it's not what they want. So,
Right.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Although I would say Rutgers tends not to be as much that sort of place. It seems like, at least when I was there, a lot of people had really thought long and hard about why they were going to Rutgers and what they were looking for. So it wasn't just sort of a knee-jerk reaction that they were doing.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's still true today. I talk to a lot of students who, like you, have gone out and gotten some experience either as a paralegal or working in a law firm in some capacity, or they've known for a long time that this is what they wanted to do. So I think you're
Yes.
right. There's an intentionality about our student body that is really interesting.
Exactly. Yeah, and which is wonderful because you need that sort of sense of almost like purpose and determination because law school, let's face it, it's in its nature to be challenging.
Right.
That's how you grow, is to be challenged. And so you need that inner sort of fire to keep at it and do it.
Yes,
Yeah.
100%. And I tell students that all the time too. I ask them to remember their why, to remember what motivated them to come to law school in the first place, because it's on the tough days when that really matters and can provide that kind of motivation to keep going. So I think that's really important.
That, and just to sort of go a little bit off base, just a good rule for life in general.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I find myself talking to clients every now and then who have had lengthy careers and, are at the top of whatever their field are. And it's still important every now and then to say, what is my why? Is it the same why that I had before, or has it changed over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, can you tell me what's the most important thing that you think you learned at Rutgers Law School while you were there?
Ooh,
You can narrow it down to one thing, right?
There were so many different experiences. So I'll probably give you a couple versus one, if you don't mind.
No, please.
There was a lot that I learned about the law. I thought I knew a lot, and I did actually, more than the average person coming into law school, because of those 3 years were very intense. I sat in on a lot of trials. I was at the, counsel table, working side by side with the lawyers. So I knew a lot, but there was so much more to learn. And so and I had a lot of good teachers along the way. I learned a lot from my peers as well.
That's wonderful. That peer-to-peer learning is so valuable.
Absolutely. Yeah. It really was so enriching. And people had come from, again, all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of experiences. That broadened my view. And I needed my view to be broadened because, again, I had grown up in this very small area. There was a lot I didn't know about life and about what the opportunities were. But the other thing is I ended up on Law Review and the editor of the Law Review. And while people, will see that as a great credential within law, it actually was a great experience for me because I had never actually run something before.
Right.
Yeah, much less have people report to me. Law Review at that time was staff of around 50 people.
That's big. That's a lot of people to manage, especially as a new manager.
Exactly. Boy, it wasn't that I was going in thinking I knew how to do it. I actually went into the running thinking I wasn't going to get it. So when I got it, it was like, congratulations, now what do I do? But it was one of the most formative experiences of my life, the management side of it, which people can sometimes discount, but it's a very important thing to understand and grow your skills in, no matter what profession you choose, even within law, especially if you're in a firm, but if you're running even an advocacy organization or something like that,
Right.
knowing how to manage it well can be the key between being successful at what you want to do or having the whole thing sort of implode. And so
Absolutely.
that experience, to have some actual managerial experience and be tested and challenged by 50 people who were very smart and knew exactly what they wanted.
Right, right.
It
Not
was
to
great.
mention all the authors that you were dealing with, the law school faculty who were submitting their work for publication too,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
a whole different constituency. Well, that's
Exactly.
fantastic. I love that that was part of your experience and that you learned so much through it.
Yeah.
That's really wonderful. And it's not the kind of learning experience that we automatically think of when we think of law school. You know, you might think about the classes you took and that kind of thing, but this is a really important, as you said, formative learning experience that
Yeah.
happened completely outside of the classroom.
That's right. And I would say I was a nerd from the get-go, so I love the classroom. But one of the great things about Rutgers is that it offered a variety of experience like that that would probably, I always felt, made you more well-rounded as a lawyer coming out of Rutgers and graduating from it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So speaking of the classes, what would you say were your favorite and least favorite classes during law school?
Are you going to turn off the microphone now?
No, but you don't have to name names.
I actually will name one name because it's a funny story. So, hands down, the class I hated the most was torts, which
Okay.
pretty innocent class, really.
Right.
But it was taught by a professor called Howard Latin, and Howard was an extremely bright, relatively young professor at that point.
Mhm.
And it was one of those classes that was huge. And he ran it sort of in the old school way, which is he was a very challenging guy. He would
Right.
call on you and you'd stand up and you'd be
Oh, wow.
sort of squirming for
Right.
5 or 10 minutes while he cross-examined you. And so at that point, I was a little bit more sure of myself than some of my colleagues. And I thought he shouldn't be doing that. So I would speak up and I would interrupt to help save the person who was standing up,
Right, right.
which he did not like. And so
It's very much an act of mercy, though, I have to say.
I know, but I paid a big price for it, because halfway through the semester, he then decided to call on me every single day.
You're kidding.
No,
Wow.
it was the Howard Latin and Kathy show. People, everyone was talking about, like, boy, he really has it in for you, blah, blah, blah.
Okay,
So
I
here's
bet
the funny
it's
part of the story, though.
yeah.
10 years later, my younger sister goes to Rutgers Law School, and she takes torts with Howard Latin. And when she graduates, she marries him.
Wow, that's unbelievable. I love it.
So
That's
this
fantastic.
professor and I, who had this really sort of adversarial sort of relationship, ends up as my brother-in-law, and my ends up being my beloved
Of
brother-in-law as well.
course.
So,
That's
we,
lovely.
we, we buried the hatchet and not in each other at that point.
That is fantastic. That is
Yeah.
a wonderful story. Well, I have a slightly different take on Professor Latin calling on you every class period. I think that is a reflection of his understanding that you had something meaningful to contribute to the discussion. So I wouldn't view it as punishment. I would view it as a compliment. I'm sure that's the case.
I think if he were still around, and unfortunately he passed last year, but if he was still around, he might say that, actually. Yeah.
I bet that's true. 100%.
And he was, I don't know if you remember, but he was a renowned environmental law attorney or professor, and, did a lot internationally in environmental law. So I really loved the chance to get to know him, perhaps outside of law school, but know that side of him as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
That's amazing. I did not have the privilege of knowing him personally, but when he did pass away, I heard from a lot of alums
Yeah.
who had a special relationship with him, and for
Yes.
whom he was a really important person and mentor. So that's
Exactly.
always really wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
So when you think back on your time at Rutgers, and this is specifically related to the point about mentorship, are there any particular people that you think helped to shape your professional journey along the way?
Because my professional journey, it was so varied, like 3 different careers. I'm not sure I could point to anybody who, did that for the totality of it.
Right.
In terms of where I ended up as a lawyer and the type of work that I did, uh, there was a professor named Robert Carter who was um, the expert on evidence. I think he wrote the New Jersey sort of guide to the evidence rules, and he was
That's so
really
cool.
well known in that. And evidence was something that I ended up with this unusual liking for. I like the fact that it was it was how you make your case. It was really,
Right.
yes. And so I loved litigation. I loved the strategy of thinking about what evidence you got in, how you would keep your opponent's evidence out. It's part of
Mm-hmm.
the whole give and take of litigation. And
Right.
so I not only took his course, but I did some independent study with him as well for 2 semesters, doing a lot of research and evidence. And it ended up, I won the evidence prize at graduation, and
Oh, you did. That's
yeah,
great.
I did. And
Congratulations.
thank you. But, it ended up shaping my career a lot, because I think I was a much stronger litigator right out of the box because of all that background. And
I'm sure.
he was very kind in mentoring me through that whole process too. I just remember how nice he was. And
That's wonderful. I'm
yeah.
so glad to hear that. That's great.
Mhm.
And you've touched on this a little bit, but I might ask you to elaborate. What were the ways in which Rutgers Law helped you prepare for your career? And you mentioned 3 different phases of your career. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about each phase.
Okay, so the first phase was after graduating, I did a federal court clerkship and then went into litigation. And I worked at Lowenstein Sandler, which is still around. Great, great firm.
Right.
I had worked in New York, but I wanted to get into the courtroom as quickly as I could. And the New Jersey firms offered more of that than the New York firms.
Right.
Um, and I represented mainly corporate clients in complex litigation
Okay.
and loved it. Uh, but over time, I started feeling, and this is where I guess asking yourself about your why comes in quite a bit. I sort of looked ahead and I thought, just simply going into court over and over again is fun, but it doesn't feel like it's got enough of a why for me.
Sure.
And I was interested, particularly in learning from my corporate clients, what it was like inside a corporation, because often as a litigator, you get handed a problem, and I kept on saying to myself, if only way back when 2 years ago they had made these kind of decisions,
Right.
they
We
would
wouldn't be here today.
I would
Right.
be earning some money, but I'd rather not have the problem on my.
Right.
And I began to get really curious about leadership and what makes for a high performing organization and what makes for a high performing leader. And so all that curiosity started becoming more engaging to me than simply being a litigator. So I thought, I'll throw my hat in the ring to go in-house. And that's what I did. And that's sort of the start of my second career. At
Okay.
first, I was in general counsel positions. But after that, I kept on putting my opinion in on the managerial side. And people liked what I said. So I got offered jobs outside of law. And so I started going, leading organizations, leading divisions, turning around uh, organizations, and
Right.
ultimately ending up in a company where I was the CEO of North America. It was an English, very well-known English energy company.
Wow,
And,
that's incredible.
yeah. So it was an amazing thing to me because I didn't have an MBA.
Right.
I,
But
I
you had a lot of intelligence and a great sense of curiosity from what I gather. You know, that the curiosity is the theme that I keep picking up on that was driving you throughout a lot of your career.
You are so right. Yeah. I'm really a big believer in keeping an open mind and being curious and asking really good questions, because that's what opens the door, both to your own learning, but sometimes when you're in the room with a lot of people who are saying, okay, we're doing this, that, and we're heading in this direction. Because I was fresh and new and I wasn't brought up in a corporation because I didn't have an MBA, I would sometimes say, well, this might be a silly question, but why wouldn't we do A instead of B?
Right.
And there would be dead silence.
And I bet sometimes the answer was, well, because we've always done B, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's great. Well, that's the value of having new voices in the room, new and different voices in the room, right?
That's right. People often
Absolutely.
talk about how tough it is to be the other in the room, whether that's because you haven't been brought up in the organization or whether it's mainly male, as many of these places were, and you're the woman or you're a person of color or whatever. We're all, there's always situations where you might end up, no matter who you are, being the other in the room.
Right.
And that can be really tough and that can be challenging, but it's also an amazing opportunity, right?
Right.
Yeah, if you can navigate some of that toughness of being in that situation, you actually can add value that wasn't there before.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned in previous outlets that you were the youngest executive and only female in various management teams. And we've been talking a little bit about what that was like.
Yeah.
What did you learn from being in those spaces as a young woman?
Well, I certainly appreciated having been in a litigator in the courtroom.
Right.
Because I think I would have been more intimidated. I mean, the actual work of being a litigator wasn't relevant, but at that point, I wasn't as easily intimidated as I might have been. So that was good.
That's hugely important.
Yeah, exactly. But I spent a lot of time first. I often think the best analogy or metaphor for being in a position like that is like working in a foreign country. What you would do is you would listen and learn and figure out the norms and the language and the culture. And then you would build relationships and you would use that before you started to really assert yourself and advocate for your position often. Mm-hmm. So I practice a certain amount of patience. And just watched and listened a little bit to the extent I could.
Right.
And then I felt strong enough to then start really inserting myself in the conversation and advocating for my position.
That sounds like a very successful strategy.
Yeah. And you earn more trust that way. I mean, you can do it the hard way without earning the trust, but it's the hard way. If you earn the trust, then you have a much easier path ahead of you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What kind of systemic challenges do you still see for women in corporate environments today?
Good question. If we're talking systemic, I don't we see the same sort of challenge that we may have had, a couple decades ago, mm-hmm. which you still see in isolated instances. But generally in very large companies, particularly when you get to the mid-management to the top, there's people pretty much assume that the woman who's there has credibility, that she's capable, she's credible. She's generally going to be treated as a peer. So that sort of systemic sort of doubt about whether you really could offer value a lot of times has gone.
That's great. That's great progress.
That's great progress. But there are still challenges.
Mhm.
One of them is that at the same time that's been getting better, the nature of these jobs in large, again, I speak mainly from a large company point of view,
Mhm.
uh, especially at the top, they've gotten much more complex than they used to be. Whereas you might have a national role, now you're playing a global role, and you have to be aware of what's going on in almost every country in the world simultaneously as you do your job. And the pace has increased. And that's true for men
Right.
as well as women. But the problem with that is that women sometimes pay a higher cost on the outside of the workforce for that. They're
Right.
balancing, not all women, but some women are balancing a lot of family oriented stuff as well. They may
Mhm.
not have a spouse who's carrying the workload.
Right.
So what I find with my clients who are men and women is that it's hard on both of them, but somewhat harder on the women. And
Sure.
sometimes you'll see women opting out for that reason because it's just too intense. Yeah.
Mhm. And that explains, I'm sure, to some extent, the disparities at the top level of law
Yes.
firms and corporations, right? Women
Yeah.
have sometimes taken themselves out of the running before those upper echelons.
There's
Uh,
also an argument there that I've seen, and it might be true. I don't know if it's correct or not, but in general, I find the women in the room, they're kind of pragmatic. They're going to say, if this is the way it's going to be, I'd much rather start my own company.
right.
Yeah. So they're
Absolutely.
right. So I control, the degree of work that I have and why I'm doing it.
Right.
So they're more inclined than my male clients to ask the why question. Why
Right.
am I killing myself like this? And
Right.
sometimes the answer is, I would kill myself like this if it was my own company, but I'm not going
Right.
to do it for someone else.
Yeah. I'm sure you see that a lot.
Yeah.
That makes intuitive sense to me. That's fascinating, though.
Mm.
And have you, when you reflect on your own career, are there particular women, either historical or personal, who have influenced your own path?
Uh, so earlier in my career, and please don't laugh, uh, I thought a lot about Queen Elizabeth I.
Right. Okay. Tell me
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. So she was, this was when I was early in my own leadership roles. She was a leader who had to sort of learn in a very precarious situation. The world was not running with very many powerful female leaders, and she was not hadn't been expecting to get that role in the first place. So she got to it to some extent through happenstance, and then had to spend a lifetime really consciously learning how to be clever and skillful in exercising power.
Hmm.
Uh, of course, she did have the advantage of being able to order executions, which modern day leaders don't have.
It's true.
Yeah,
Times have changed. Yes.
right. That would be nice to have sometimes too when you're in the leadership role. But in any
Yeah.
event, so I thought about her a lot, and I took some inspiration, I think, from her. But the more I went along my career, the more I looked inward rather than outward. I learned one of the things I had to learn, I think, in my own career, and I think it's true for a lot of leaders, is I had to learn to really trust myself. I
Right.
had to, that you can spend a lot of time. Leadership is can be a nerve wracking job. And it's really helpful to look at role models and to have some. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to do the work yourself. You're going to have to walk through the fire yourself, the
Mhm.
complexity of whatever it is. And so you have to really start learning to trust your own judgment and your instincts at a certain point in time. And
Right.
that's what I started to do more increasingly. And that means you have to be willing to be wrong sometimes too, but you
Right.
got to trust yourself. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. And no one is right 100% of the time.
No, for sure.
And you previously have spoken about how you've spent a long time, really a lifetime, studying what works and what doesn't work in a leadership environment, and when navigating complex environments. So, in your experience, if you could sum it up, and I know I'm asking for a lot here, but if you could sum it up, what have you learned about what works and what doesn't work?
I think there are two highlights, and of course, a lot of details, and I won't go into that because often that's what I'm doing in the role. I'll work with someone for a couple of years to get them ready for the CEO spot or something. So we're going through a lot of learning through then. But I think the what works, it, amazingly, it's the skills of influence, persuasion, and presence. So you're moving your ideas forward always in a large, complex environment. It's almost, you could almost say in a large company, it's at the top, it's a war of ideas. Everyone has an opinion. Sort of like going back to law review, everyone
Right.
has an opinion. They're very smart. They all have an opinion. The question is, how do you navigate that? How do you get everyone aligned, all on the same page, and all in agreement? That's a
Right.
real challenge. And whatever your title is, that's your challenge. How do you get everybody aligned and on the same page?
Right.
And the skills of influence and persuasion are really, really helpful to do it. And here's the good news about that is that anyone can learn them.
Mm-hmm.
They are completely learnable. It's not like, you have to be naturally good at it. You can, and the contrary is true. If you're naturally good at it, you can always get better at it. There's
Right.
no ceiling. And so the more you get really good at that, the more you create that alignment and that followership that you need. So that's what works.
Okay. Well, that's encouraging to know that you can really build these skills.
You can. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. I've seen people who, really didn't seem at all talented at it. But if you
Hmm.
gave them one or two skills to practice, they got so much better. So,
That's
yeah.
great.
The flip side of that, and I'm not sure you can cure this, is, there are some people who are just very close minded. They're not curious. They know what they know.
Hmm.
I sometimes call them the Popeye people. They say, I am what I am. And they are not going to put a lot of effort into putting everybody on the same page. And sometimes they're self interested as
Right.
well. That sort of person is going to struggle a
Hmm.
lot in a complex environment that's changing. And often they may hang around for a little while, but often you see them leaving an organization because they're just not getting anywhere because
Right.
of that. Yeah,
They're not enjoying success because that is a limiting factor.
that's
Yeah.
exactly right.
And what what do you think is the one quality, if there is one, that every great leader has?
Um, that's such a great question. And it's probably close to the opposite of what I said. And
Hmm.
it's used a lot by the assessment firms to consider who is a high potential. And that is someone who has an open and curious mind. The phrase that's used for it a lot in the business is learning agility. It's someone who is so eager to learn that they would quit if they weren't learning.
Wow,
Yeah,
that sound like a great quality in a leader.
exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And also courage is really helpful as well. And that is
Sure.
something that doesn't, again, you have to be courageous and take tough stands. So.
Yeah. I'm sure every leader has to do that. And what about a misconception? Is there a misconception about leaders or leadership that you would love to clear up?
Yeah, another great question. Um, I'd like to really sort of point out that leadership is an art and science in and of itself. And so often we get put in leadership positions and we just think it naturally happens. But it really is something that you have to consciously develop in yourself and get help from others to develop in yourself. So often, if I'm at a cocktail party and someone is pointing to someone who's in the news and they're saying, oh, bad leader, that person messed up. Often what I'm seeing actually is someone who might be a normal, decent human being, but is in a highly complex situation and has received no training about
Right.
how to be a good leader.
Right.
So, yeah,
Right.
it's something that doesn't just magically happen. You have to learn it.
That's certainly true in academic settings where a lot of the leadership comes from the professoriate. And so you might be a faculty member one day and the next day sort of thrown into administration with no training on what that looks like or what it means to be a leader
Yeah,
of
you
an
are so
academic
right. Yeah.
institution. Yeah.
It's true in the law firms too.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Right. One day you're a practicing lawyer or partner, and then you're managing partner, and suddenly it's your management skills that matter, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know in the past you've said storytelling matters, and I could not agree more. It's one of the reasons we do this podcast, and so I want to ask, how is storytelling important to leadership? How does it help you to be an effective leader?
I think it helps you in two main areas. Well, first, who doesn't just love a good story? So,
Exactly. No,
yeah,
that's true.
yeah. But a leader often has to make something that's very complex understandable to everybody in the organization. That's hard to do with just words alone. You end up with a 2-page speech and people don't really remember much of it at all.
Right.
Telling a story that captures what you're trying to say and illustrates it, really a great way to get people to understand it and connect with it and align. And so the other reason to tell stories is for people to, again, personally connect. When you're a leader, often you're so distant from all the other people in the organization. You try your best, but there's no way that they truly know who you are
Right.
or that you truly know who they are. But telling a story creates a space where you both sort of are in that story together and you feel that you've connected.
That's lovely. I love that mental picture.
Mhm.
What do you think are the best and worst parts of your job?
I don't think there's much that's the worst.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
What a great place to be
I
to
know. I sometimes
feel that
say I
way.
would do this job even if I wasn't paid for it. It is that
Right.
good. So just to explain a little bit, the type of coaching that I do is the best analogy is probably like being a coach in the sports world with someone who's like already a high performance athlete and
Right.
he or she wants to get to the Olympics. So it's not what we would call as remedial coaching or something. So the best thing is that I'm constantly talking to super smart, capable people, and we're having very deep conversations. We're not talking superficially.
Mhm.
So I'm always learning from someone who's deep in the bowels of complex situation.
Right.
And I feel privileged to understand where they are and to see how they're thinking about it,
Mhm.
and to also probably help them out through it. But it's a great place to be, especially if you're a learning junkie. So
Right.
I get paid to have conversations where I'm learning all the time. I mean, how cool is that?
That's a pretty good gig, right?
Exactly.
That's great. That's great. And many of our listeners are prospective law students. So I'm gonna shift the focus for a moment back to law students. And I'm sure law students feel a lot of pressure sometimes to follow a very linear path to sort of get the job in their second summer and then continue down that road as an associate at a particular law firm. What would you want them to know about careers that don't fit a particular mold or the traditional mold?
Yeah. That's a very important question, I think, because law is very, that the template for where you go is still very embedded.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot more people that, like me, who have changed careers than there used to be. But the law side of things, there's a little bit of disapproval when you do that. Like, why are you
Right.
going this way? I actually have had, I had people who were well-meaning people, really cared about my career when I was leaving to go in-house, sit down with me, and they were quite upset because they thought that was not a good decision. That
Wow.
being said, the pressure is great, but keep on checking your why. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the antidote to all of that. Just don't keep all your focus on the external pressure. Look within yourself and say, what am I doing here and why am I doing it? What does it
Right.
feel like? At the end of the day, do I feel like I'm lucky to have this role and to have contributed? Am I having the impact that I want to have? Am I learning things? All of those really great questions, because a great career is a journey. Probably someone said this somewhere else, but I can't give them credit. But I always think of it as a journey that you're on to get wiser, to grow your judgment, to make a positive difference in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a ladder. The better analogy is a journey. That's the enriching analogy.
Right.
Simply climbing a ladder at the end of the day is not going to, if that's your only why, is
Right.
not going to fill you up. Yeah.
That is
So,
so important.
yeah,
Such an important observation. Thank you for sharing that.
sure.
And if my last question for you is, if you could go back in time and speak to yourself on the very first day of law school, what advice would you give your younger self?
Hmm. Um, I would probably say, don't be so tough on yourself.
Good advice. Absolutely.
And I probably would not have taken it. But I think it is good advice.
I
Uh,
agree.
yeah, you're going to be putting yourself in uncomfortable positions, but that doesn't mean you should be tough on yourself or berating yourself or comparing yourself to other people. The only thing you should be thinking about is, again, focus on what's meaningful, make the most of the experience and try to enjoy it along the way as well, because there are those moments if you're paying attention for them.
Absolutely. Also, really great advice.
Yeah.
That is wonderful. Well, Kathleen, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for sharing all of that wisdom and insight with our listeners and with me. I learned a lot today too. So
Oh, what a
I
pleasure.
appreciate
Yeah.
you taking the time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's very sweet to me to be talking to people still after all these years at Rutgers. It's very close to my heart.
That's wonderful. Well, we hope to maintain that connection. So thank
Great.
you again.
Okay. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The Power of Attorney is a production of Rutgers Law School. With 2 locations just minutes from New York City and Philadelphia, Rutgers Law offers the prestige and reputation of a large, nationally known university with a personal, small campus experience. Learn more by visiting us at law.rutgers.edu.